Kira stood at the edge of the observation deck of the human vessel USS Trinity, watching the endless expanse of space stretch before her. The stars twinkled like ancient diamonds scattered across black velvet, each one representing worlds and civilizations that existed in the vast unknown. She had traveled through countless star systems during her lifetime, but the sight of deep space never lost its ability to fill her with wonder and a strange sense of purpose. Behind her, she could hear the soft padding of scaled feet as Solace and Ember approached. The two dragons had been her companions since childhood, bonded to her through a connection that transcended the ordinary relationship between human and pet. These creatures were far more than animals. They were intelligent, loyal, and possessed abilities that no technology in the galaxy could replicate. Their scales shimmered with an otherworldly purple and silver hue, catching the starlight and reflecting it back in hypnotic patterns. Kira reached out and touched Solace's neck, feeling the warm energy that pulsed beneath the scales. The dragon made a low humming sound, a frequency so deep that Kira felt it vibrate through her entire body. This was their way of communicating, a language of emotion and intuition that had no need for words. Through this connection, Kira could sense Solace's concerns. The dragons knew what was coming. They could feel it in the energy currents that flowed through space, in the disturbances that only ancient creatures like them could perceive. The threat was real and growing closer every day. The twin alien girls, known throughout the galaxy as the Veiled Ones, had begun their campaign of destruction 6 months ago. They had emerged from the outer reaches of known space with technology that defied conventional understanding. Their crystalline ships could phase through ordinary shields, making them nearly invulnerable to standard weapons. They had already destroyed 17 human colonies and 3 research stations. The death toll had climbed into the thousands, and the fear was spreading like a plague through every human settlement. Kira had been assigned to the USS Trinity by the Galactic Council, specifically chosen for this dangerous mission because of her unique abilities and her proven loyalty to humanity. The humans had always treated her kind with respect, something that was rare among the species that inhabited the galaxy. Most alien races saw elves as relics of an ancient past, beings whose time had already passed. But humans were different. They valued strength of character over age, loyalty over bloodline, and capability over tradition. Captain Grace Mitchell was the commanding officer of the Trinity, a woman in her late 40s with silver streaking through her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much conflict and loss. She had welcomed Kira aboard with a firm handshake and a direct gaze that communicated honesty and determination. The captain understood that this mission would likely be the final stand against the Veiled Ones. If they failed here, humanity would lose the will to fight back, and the galaxy would fall under the control of these mysterious and ruthless invaders. The crew of the Trinity was composed of the finest soldiers and engineers that the human military could gather. They had spent weeks in preparation, running simulations and developing strategies to counter the alien technology. But everyone aboard the vessel knew that strategy and weapons alone might not be enough. They needed something more. They needed an edge that the Veiled Ones would not expect. That edge was Kira and her dragons. Ember moved closer to Kira, his larger form towering over her even though the dragon was still relatively small compared to the legendary beasts of ancient history. This dragon possessed a different energy than Solace. While Solace was calm and thoughtful, Ember was restless and eager for action. Kira could sense the dragon's frustration at being confined to the ship, his desire to engage in combat burning like a physical force. She understood his feelings completely. For months they had trained with the human crew, learning the layout of the ship and how to work in coordination with the technical systems. The dragons had proven invaluable in understanding energy systems that human technology could not access. Their neural pathways operated on frequencies that allowed them to interact with electromagnetic fields in ways that defied conventional science. This ability had been carefully tested and refined through countless hours of practice. Kira recalled the first time she had brought the dragons to the main weapons chamber. The human engineers had been skeptical at first, watching with doubt as the two creatures approached the massive energy conduits that powered the ship's arsenal. But when Solace and Ember had demonstrated their ability to purge corrupted code from the systems without causing damage, the skepticism had transformed into amazement and gratitude. Dr. Marcus Chen, the chief engineer of the Trinity, had approached Kira afterward with wonder in his eyes. He had explained that the virus the Veiled Ones had introduced into the ship's systems was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was designed to spread and replicate, slowly destroying the ship's ability to fire its weapons. By the time anyone had discovered it, the virus had infiltrated nearly every level of the weapons array. Conventional methods of removal would have required disabling the entire system, which would have taken weeks to rebuild. But the dragons had accomplished in minutes what human technology could not do in weeks. Their unique biology allowed them to burn away the corrupted code while preserving the underlying infrastructure. It was as if they could see through the digital disease and extract only the harmful parts, leaving everything else intact and functional. Now, as Kira stood with her dragons on the observation deck, she knew that they were about to be tested in ways that training could not prepare them for. Real combat was different from simulations. The stakes were higher, the consequences more severe, and the enemy would fight with a desperation born from confidence in their own superiority. The communication system crackled to life, and Captain Mitchell's voice filled the observation deck. All senior officers report to the briefing room immediately. We have received intelligence about the Veiled One's next target. Kira felt her body tense. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for was finally arriving. She looked into the eyes of her dragons, seeing her own determination reflected back at her. Solace and Ember would follow her into any battle, through any hardship, because that was the nature of their bond. They trusted her completely, and she trusted them with her life. She began walking toward the briefing room, her dragons following close behind. The corridors of the USS Trinity were lined with crew members who had come to respect and admire the elf warrior and her dragons. They nodded in acknowledgement as Kira passed, some of them offering quiet words of encouragement. Kira realized that these humans no longer saw her as an alien or an outsider. She had become part of their crew, part of their family in the way that only shared purpose and mutual respect could create. The briefing room was a large chamber with a central table displaying a three-dimensional, holographic projection of the surrounding space. Captain Mitchell stood at the head of the table, flanked by her senior officers. They were tactical specialists, weapons experts, and strategists, all of them studying the hologram with intense focus. When Kira entered with Solace and Ember, the captain looked up and gestured for her to approach. The dragons moved gracefully between the human officers, their presence somehow making the room feel smaller and more intimate despite its size. "We have located the next target," Mitchell said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "The Veiled Ones are moving toward the human colony at Kepler Station. According to our calculations, they will arrive there in approximately 4 days. This is our opportunity. This is where we make our stand." Kira studied the hologram carefully, noting the position of Kepler Station and the likely approach vector of the alien ships. She could feel the dragons analyzing the information as well, their intelligence processing the tactical implications just as rapidly as any human strategist. "Our plan is to move the Trinity to this position," Mitchell continued, pointing to a location between Kepler Station and open space. "We will ambush them before they reach the colony. Kira, your dragons will be essential to this mission. We need them to do what they did with the virus. We need them to disable the alien ship's defenses." Kira nodded slowly. She understood the danger inherent in what the captain was asking. The dragons would be placing themselves in direct proximity to the enemy, vulnerable to weapons fire and attack. But this was what they had trained for, and this was why they had volunteered for this mission. "We are ready," Kira said firmly. "My dragons and I will not fail you, Captain." Mitchell extended her hand across the table and Kira clasped it firmly. Together they sealed a commitment that would soon be tested in the crucible of combat. As Kira stood there, feeling the strength and determination in the captain's grip, she knew that humanity's survival might depend on what happened in the next 4 days. The fate of thousands of lives, the future of the human species itself, rested on their ability to work together and overcome an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Solace and Ember pressed close to Kira, and she could feel their absolute certainty that together, they would succeed. It was time to prepare for war, and the universe would soon learn what happened when humans, elves. The journey to the ambush position took 3 days. During this time, the USS Trinity maintained a state of constant readiness, with all systems checked and rechecked by the dedicated crew. Every weapon was loaded, every shield generator tested, and every emergency protocol reviewed. Kira spent most of this time training with her dragons in the cargo bay that had been designated as their quarters. The training was both physical and mental. Kira worked with Solace and Ember to refine their ability to navigate through the ship's energy systems while under stress and pressure. She had created a complex network of obstacles and challenges that simulated what they might encounter during actual combat. The dragons would need to move quickly through the ship's networks, burning away defensive measures that the Veiled Ones might have inserted into the Trinity's systems, all while the vessel was under active attack. Ember proved to be particularly effective at aggressive pursuits. The dragon possessed a natural talent for cutting through digital defenses with raw power and speed. Solace, on the other hand, excelled at precision work, carefully dismantling complex systems one layer at a time. Together, they represented a balanced threat that no amount of alien technology could completely defend against. Dr. Chen visited the cargo bay on the second day to check on their progress. The chief engineer watched with fascination as the dragons worked through one of his test scenarios. He had brought with him a modified energy panel that mimicked some of the corrupted code patterns they had discovered in the Trinity's weapon systems. The dragons attacked it with enthusiasm, their combined efforts purging the digital infection in less than 2 minutes. "This is incredible," Chen said, shaking his head in amazement. "I have been in the military for 20 years, and I have never seen anything like this. If these dragons can do this in actual combat, we might actually have a chance." Kira felt a surge of pride at the engineer's words. She had always believed in the capabilities of Solace and Ember, but hearing it confirmed by someone with Chen's expertise gave her additional confidence. The dragons were not just trained animals or ancient relics. They were warriors in their own right, possessing abilities that made them invaluable in this conflict. On the evening before they were scheduled to reach the ambush position, Kira found herself alone on the observation deck once again. The stars seemed to glow with an intensity that made her think of home, of the ancient forests where her people had lived for countless generations. Those days felt like they belonged to another lifetime, though it had been only a few years since she had chosen to leave her home and dedicate herself to protecting human worlds. Solace joined her at the viewport, his presence comforting and familiar. The dragon rested his head against the transparent aluminum, and together they watched the stars slide past. Kira wondered if the Veiled Ones could see beauty in the cosmos, or if they viewed it only as a resource to be conquered and exploited. She suspected that creatures motivated solely by a desire for power and dominance could never truly appreciate the wonder of creation. Ember appeared moments later, his restless energy making him pace back and forth across the observation deck. Kira could sense through their bond that the dragon was eager for combat, ready to finally put all their training to use in a real battle. She understood his impatience completely. Training was necessary, but actual engagement was what warriors lived for. "Tomorrow," Kira said to her dragons, placing a hand on each of their heads. "Tomorrow we fight. Tomorrow we protect the humans and their colony. Tomorrow we show the Veiled Ones that they cannot destroy what they do not understand." The dragons hummed in agreement, their combined resonance creating a harmonic frequency that seemed to make the very fabric of the ship vibrate with anticipation. When dawn came on the 4th day, the USS Trinity moved into position behind a dense asteroid field. The location had been carefully chosen by the tactical team. It provided cover for the human vessel, while offering a clear view of the approach corridor where the Veiled Ones would have to pass to reach Kepler Station. The ambush was set, and now it was simply a matter of waiting for the enemy to arrive. The crew maintained their posts with professional efficiency. Kira stood on the bridge beside Captain Mitchell, with Solace and Ember positioned near the main tactical display. Every person aboard the ship understood that this moment would determine the fate of millions. There was no room for error, no second chances if they failed. The communication officer suddenly looked up from her station, her eyes widening. "Captain, I have a contact." Multiple contacts appearing from hyperspace approximately 50,000 kilometers from our position. All eyes on the tactical display. Mitchell commanded, her voice carrying the calm authority of a veteran commander. "Let us see what we are facing." The holographic projection updated in real time, showing the arrival of the Veiled Ones' ships. There were 3 crystalline vessels, not 2 as intelligence had suggested. The ships were beautiful and terrible at the same time, their geometric forms seeming to shift and flow with their own internal logic. They moved through space with a grace that belied their lethal purpose. 3 ships instead of 2, Mitchell observed, her jaw tightening slightly. This changes our calculations. Kira, are your dragons still ready? Kira looked down at Solace and Ember. She could feel their confidence through their bond, their absolute certainty that they could accomplish the mission before them. Yes, Captain, they are ready. The alien ships began to move toward Kepler Station, apparently unaware of the Trinity's presence hidden behind the asteroids. For a few minutes, everything remained quiet. Then Captain Mitchell straightened in her command chair and gave the order that would begin the engagement. Full power to engines. Bring all weapons online. Fire on my command. The USS Trinity emerged from behind the asteroids like a predator emerging from the tall grass. The human vessel's weapons opened fire immediately, the combined fury of the Trinity's arsenal directing itself at the nearest alien ship. Energy bolts blazed across space, cutting through the darkness with lines of brilliant light. The veiled ones responded with shocking speed, their ships maneuvering with a precision that showed they had known about the ambush all along. The crystalline vessels fired back, their weapons producing energy beams that were unlike anything in the human arsenal. These beams seemed to bend and curve, following paths through space that defied conventional physics. Take evasive action, Mitchell shouted, gripping the armrest of her command chair as the Trinity shook from enemy fire. All crew members braced for impact. Kira felt the moment when everything shifted into the critical phase. This was no longer training or simulation. This was real combat, and their survival depended on executing their plan with perfect precision. She turned to her dragons and made a gesture that they had practiced hundreds of times during their training sessions. Go. Disable their weapons. Protect our crew. Solace and Ember bolted from the bridge, their scaled forms moving with incredible speed through the corridors of the ship. They knew their route, had memorized every turn and passage. Their destination was the main weapons chamber, where they would work to neutralize the alien weapons that were currently pummeling the Trinity's shields. Captain Mitchell watched the tactical display as another volley of alien fire struck the ship. The shields held for now, but they would not hold forever. The damage reports were already starting to flow in from throughout the vessel. Fire on decks 3 and 5. Casualties reported in engineering. Shield generators at 78% efficiency and dropping. Kira monitored the Dragon's progress through their mental link. They had reached the weapons chamber and were already analyzing the alien attack patterns. The Dragons worked to trace how the Veiled Ones were coordinating their weapons fire, looking for the digital command structures that controlled the alien arsenal. The Trinity's weapons continued to fire, but they were having minimal effect on the crystalline ships. The alien technology was too advanced, too different from anything humanity had developed. The only advantage the humans had was the presence of the Dragons and their unique ability to interact with energy systems in ways that conventional technology could not match. Come on, Kira whispered urgently, sensing through her bond that Solace and Ember were approaching a critical juncture in their work. We need those weapons now. The Dragons redoubled their efforts, their combined power burning through the alien defenses that had been carefully constructed around the ship's energy systems. It was like watching a lock being opened by fire instead of a key. Not elegant, not graceful, but effective and immediate. Suddenly, the Trinity's weapons began to fire with renewed intensity. The Dragons had done it. They had unlocked something in the alien technology, revealing a vulnerability that the human weapons could now exploit. The nearest crystalline ship shuddered under the concentrated barrage, its perfect geometric form beginning to crack and fracture. Excellent work. Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication system. The weapons are firing at twice their normal efficiency. Whatever the Dragons did, it is working. Captain Mitchell allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. All hands maintain fire. Push them back. Do not let them retreat. The first crystalline ship began to crumble under the renewed assault from the USS Trinity's weapons. The perfect geometric form that had seemed so invulnerable moments before was now splitting apart like fragile ice. Explosions rippled across its surface as internal systems failed, destroyed by the combination of human firepower and the Dragon's sabotage of its defensive protocols. But the victory was bittersweet. The remaining 2 alien vessels had learned from watching their companions' destruction. They shifted their attack pattern, focusing their concentrated firepower on the Trinity's shield generators. Captain Mitchell watched in growing alarm as the status reports poured in from throughout the ship. The shields were failing faster than the crew could repair them. "We need those shields back up to full strength," Mitchell commanded, her voice steady despite the dire situation. "Begin charging the auxiliary generators." The Trinity shuddered under another volley of alien fire. Emergency lights flickered in the corridors, casting red shadows across the faces of the crew members. The ship had been designed to be tough, built to withstand the rigors of combat and the stresses of deep space travel. But even the most advanced human technology had its limits. Kira remained on the bridge, her hands clenched at her sides as she monitored the Dragon's progress through their mental connection. Solace and Ember had completed their initial sabotage of the Trinity's own systems, and were now attempting to disrupt the alien weapons fire in a different way. They were working to interfere with the command signals that the Veiled Ones were using to coordinate their attack. It was a dangerous and unprecedented strategy. The Dragons had never attempted anything this ambitious before. They were trying to inject harmonic frequencies into the alien energy systems, disrupting the carefully calibrated weapon targeting and fire control mechanisms. If they succeeded, it would give the Trinity the breathing room it desperately needed. If they failed, the ship's defenses would collapse completely, and everyone aboard would die. Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication system once again, his tone reflecting both excitement and concern. "We are reading unusual energy fluctuations in the enemy weapon systems. They appear to be malfunctioning. Some of their weapon emitters are misfiring, directing energy into empty space instead of at our ship." "That is them," Kira said quietly, understanding what was happening. "The Dragons are disrupting the alien targeting systems." The next volley of fire from the Veiled Ones' ships was noticeably less coordinated than before. Some of the energy beams went wide, passing harmlessly through the space that the Trinity had occupied only moments before. Captain Mitchell immediately capitalized on this advantage, ordering the human weapons to concentrate fire on one of the remaining alien vessels. The crystalline ship twisted and turned, attempting to evade the barrage, but it was now operating at reduced efficiency. The harmonic frequencies that Solace and Ember were generating were spreading through its systems like a digital virus, attacking the core processes that controlled its propulsion and defensive capabilities. "Forward weapons, concentrate on the starboard enemy vessel," Mitchell commanded. "I want that ship disabled." The Trinity's weapon systems unleashed a storm of energy and matter, directed with lethal precision at the second crystalline ship. Under normal circumstances, this barrage might have inflicted superficial damage to the alien vessel, but with its systems disrupted by the Dragon's interference, it was far more vulnerable. Sections of the ship's hull began to fracture and tear, exposing the interior systems to the vacuum of space. Kira felt a surge of triumph through her connection with the Dragons. They were succeeding. Against technology that the galaxy had considered unstoppable, human determination combined with ancient elf wisdom and dragon power was proving to be an effective counterattack. But the third alien ship was beginning to shift its strategy. Instead of continuing to attack the Trinity directly, it was attempting to change course and flee. Its damaged companions might have been expendable to the Veiled Ones, sacrifices made in exchange for valuable data about human capabilities and limitations. "Captain, the third vessel is attempting to escape," the tactical officer reported. "It is moving to jump coordinates not on my watch," Mitchell said coldly. "All available weapons concentrate on that vessel. I want its engines disabled before it can reach hyperspace." The Trinity's weapons turned their attention to the fleeing ship, but the Veiled Ones had created a diversion. The two damaged ships, despite their reduced capability, launched a coordinated attack on the human vessel's engine room. It was a suicide run, but it was effective. The explosions that rocked the Trinity's aft section sent crew members sprawling across the bridge, and alarms screamed through the communication system. "Engine room damaged," the damage control officer reported, his voice tight with urgency. "We have lost 30% of our propulsion capability. I am rerouting power through the auxiliary systems, but we will not be at full power for several minutes." Several minutes was time that the fleeing alien ship did not intend to give them. The crystalline vessel was already moving toward the jump coordinates, its phasing technology activating to pull it into hyperspace and away from the battle. Kira understood what needed to happen. She reached out through her mental connection to Solace and Ember with a command that required absolute trust and perfect coordination. The dragons had been trained for combat within the ship's systems, but what Kira was asking them to do now had never been attempted before. She was asking them to follow the alien weapon signals and make contact with the enemy ship itself. The dragons hesitated for only a moment, and then Kira felt their determination return. They would do this. They would push their abilities to the limit and beyond because they believed in Kira. And Kira believed in Captain Mitchell and the crew of the USS Trinity. Solace and Ember channeled their combined power through the Trinity's systems, following the weapon signals to their source in the alien vessel. The connection was tenuous and dangerous, but the dragons maintained it through sheer force of will. They began to pump disruptive harmonics directly into the alien ship's hyperspace engine systems. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Veiled One's vessel shuddered violently as its jump drive tried to activate with corrupted instructions flowing through its systems. The phase technology that had made the ship nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons began to fail, its carefully calibrated mechanisms overwhelmed by the harmonic interference. The escape route collapsed. The crystalline ship fell back into normal space, its momentum carrying it directly into the path of the Trinity's weapons. "Fire," Mitchell commanded, and the human vessel unleashed everything it had left. The final assault was overwhelming. Without the protection of its phasing shields, and with its engines damaged by the dragon's interference, the third alien vessel had no defense against the concentrated firepower of the USS Trinity. The crystalline ship exploded in a shower of energy and debris, its destruction final and absolute. For a moment, silence filled the bridge. Everyone was processing what had just happened. The Veiled Ones, the enemies that had seemed unstoppable, had been defeated. The three crystalline ships that had posed such a terrible threat to human civilization were now nothing but expanding clouds of wreckage and cooling. Energy Captain Mitchell slowly released her grip on the armrest of her command chair. She looked over at Kira, and there was something profound in her gaze, a recognition of what had just been accomplished through the combination of human courage and the dragon's incredible abilities. "All hands. Maintain alert status," Mitchell commanded, her voice steady and professional, despite the emotion that flickered across her features. "Begin damage assessment and rescue operations. I want to know the status of all systems." The crew immediately snapped into action following their training and protocols. Damage reports started flowing in. The Trinity had sustained significant injuries during the battle. Fires burned in 3 sections of the ship. The engines were operating at reduced capacity, and there were casualties among the crew. But the ship was still flying, still functional. More importantly, the threat had been eliminated. Kepler Station was safe. The millions of humans who lived in that colony would continue to live and prosper, all because Kira and her dragons had been willing to fight alongside humanity. Dr. Chen arrived on the bridge several minutes later, his uniform torn and singed from the intense heat of the engine room. He approached Kira directly and extended his hand in the human gesture of gratitude and respect. "Your dragons saved this ship and this crew," he said simply. "I do not know how they did what they did, but I know that without them we would all be dead right now." Kira clasped his hand firmly. "They did it because they believe in you, Doctor. They believe in humanity and in what Captain Mitchell is trying to accomplish." That belief gave them the strength to push beyond what they thought was possible. Captain Mitchell joined them, her authoritative presence commanding attention. "Kira, I have a question for you. Do you think your dragons could teach our engineers how to replicate what they just did? Not the biological aspects, but the principles behind their harmonic interference technology." The next 72 hours were a blur of activity. The USS Trinity limped back toward the human territory with its damaged engines straining to carry the battered vessel home. The crew worked around the clock, performing repairs and tending to the wounded. The casualty count had been lower than anyone had feared, but the loss of even a single crew member weighed heavily on Captain Mitchell and her senior officers. Kira spent much of her time with Solace and Ember in the medical bay, ensuring that the dragons were properly rested and recovering from the intense physical and mental exertion of the battle. The effort that the dragons had expended to project their consciousness across the gap between the two ships had pushed them to the very edge of their capabilities. For several hours after the battle, Both Solace and Ember had been nearly comatose, their bodies and minds completely drained by what they had accomplished. Dr. Chen had been fascinated by this aspect of the dragon's nature. He had performed a series of non-invasive scans to try to understand how the creature's biological systems worked and how they were able to generate and manipulate the harmonic frequencies that gave them their remarkable abilities. The results had been astounding. The dragon's neural structures were unlike anything that human neurology had ever studied. Their brains contained structures and processes that seemed to operate on principles that human science could not yet fully explain. The dragons are not just animals, Chen had explained to Captain Mitchell during a briefing. They are a different form of intelligence entirely. Their brains work on frequencies and harmonics rather than the electrical impulses that characterize human neural activity. In many ways, they are more similar to a living musical instrument than to biological organisms as we understand them. This revelation had sparked intense interest among the scientific community. Messages had been flooding in from research stations and universities throughout human space, all of them requesting the opportunity to study the dragons and learn more about how their unique abilities could be harnessed for the benefit of human civilization. But Kira was cautious about allowing too much access to her companions. The dragons were intelligent beings with their own rights and autonomy. They were not laboratory specimens or tools to be studied and then discarded. They were partners in the fight against the threats that faced the galaxy, and they deserved to be treated with the dignity and respect that any sentient being commanded. She discussed this concern with Captain Mitchell in the captain's quarters, a small but comfortable space that overlooked the stars through a wide viewport. Mitchell listened to Kira's concerns with the attention of someone accustomed to dealing with complex ethical and political issues. "I understand your hesitation," Mitchell said, settling into a chair and gesturing for Kira to do the same. "The dragons deserve protection from exploitation, but I would argue that they also deserve the opportunity to help shape the future of humanity and the galaxy. What they accomplished in that battle has changed everything. Now that the scientific community knows what is possible, there will be pressure to develop similar capabilities or to understand how the dragon's abilities could be adapted for technological use." Kira nodded slowly. The captain had a point. The dragon's actions had already begun to reshape humanity's role in the galactic power structure. The Veiled Ones had seemed nearly unstoppable until they encountered the combination of human technology and dragon abilities working in coordination. Now other species might begin to question whether humanity was weaker than they had previously assumed. "What kind of timeline are you thinking of for these research initiatives?" Kira asked carefully. Mitchell leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "At least several months, maybe longer. We need to move carefully and deliberately. The last thing I want is to have the dragons push too hard too fast. They need time to recover and adjust to what they have experienced. But the potential here is enormous. If we can understand even a fraction of what makes them special, we could develop defensive and offensive capabilities that would secure humanity's position in the galaxy for generations to come." The ship arrived at the main human military installation 3 days later. The USS Trinity received a hero's welcome, with celebration and recognition for the victory against the Veiled Ones. The media descended on the vessel like a swarm of hungry insects, desperate for interviews and information about what had really happened during the battle. Kira found the attention to be overwhelming and somewhat intrusive. She was not accustomed to being the center of focus, and she certainly had not engaged in combat for the sake of seeking glory or recognition. She had fought because it was the right thing to do, because humans deserved the chance to survive and thrive in a universe that seemed determined to destroy them. But Captain Mitchell understood that the media attention could serve a strategic purpose. The story of how humans, elves, and dragons had worked together to defeat an alien threat captured the public imagination in a way that ordinary military reports never could. It gave people hope and reminded them of why they were worth fighting for. Kira agreed to give a single interview to the human media, a decision that reached every corner of human space and beyond within hours. The interview was conducted by a journalist named Rebecca Walsh, a woman in her early 50s with intelligent eyes and a direct manner of speaking that reminded Kira of Captain Mitchell. "The war against the Veiled Ones has been won," Rebecca said during the interview, which was recorded and distributed across the HoloNet. "But there is a larger question that everyone is asking. What does this victory mean for humanity? What role will the dragons and the elf warrior Kira play in shaping the future? Kira took a moment to consider her response carefully. She was intensely aware that her words would be analyzed and discussed by millions of people, that her answer could influence how humanity viewed itself and its place in the galaxy for years to come. This victory belongs to Captain Mitchell and the crew of the USS Trinity, Kira said finally. They are the ones who showed courage and determination in the face of an enemy that seemed unstoppable. My dragons and I simply provided additional capabilities that complemented their human strengths. What this victory proves is that when species work together, when we set aside our differences and focus on our common goals, we can accomplish things that would be impossible for any single group working alone. Rebecca leaned forward with interest. There is a movement within the Galactic Council to propose humanity for a seat as a major power. Historically, humans have been considered a younger, less experienced species, but after this victory, some members are beginning to question that assumption. Do you think humans deserve this recognition? Kira felt Solace and Ember move closer to her, sensing through their bond that she was being asked to make a profound statement about the nature of humanity and their place in the galaxy. She thought about everything she had witnessed during her time with humans, all the small acts of kindness and courage that made up the fabric of their civilization. Humans do not need recognition from the Galactic Council to prove their worth, Kira said firmly. They have already proven it through their actions and their character. They treat other species as equals rather than subjects. They innovate and adapt when faced with challenges. They have the capacity for genuine compassion and loyalty. These are the qualities that make them exceptional. And these are the qualities that will ensure their place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. The interview spread like wildfire across human communication networks. Within a week, Kira had become something of a celebrity throughout human space, though she had never sought or desired such recognition. More importantly, the interview had influenced the political discussions within the Galactic Council. 3 weeks after her interview, Kira received word that humanity had been granted a seat on the council, with Captain Grace Mitchell chosen as their representative. The victory against the Veiled Ones had not just saved a human colony. It had changed the course of human history, propelling them from the status of an emerging power to one of the major players in galactic politics. Kira attended the ceremonial session where Mitchell took her oath as a member of the Galactic Council. The moment was profound and moving, a recognition that humanity had earned its place through courage and competence rather than through birthright or ancient tradition. After the ceremony, Mitchell found Kira in a private chamber within the council buildings. The captain looked tired but satisfied, her uniform pressed and formal, her bearing reflecting the weight of the responsibility she had just accepted. "Thank you," Mitchell said simply, extending her hand. "None of this would have been possible without you and your dragons." Kira clasped her hand firmly. "You did this yourself, Captain. You believed that victory was possible, and you gave your crew the leadership they needed to make it happen. My dragons and I simply fought beside you." Mitchell smiled, and there was warmth and genuine affection in that smile. "I hope you will continue to fight beside us. The galaxy is still full of dangers and unknowns. I would feel a great deal more confident facing those challenges knowing that you and your dragons are part of humanity's future." 6 months had passed since the victory over the Veiled Ones, and the galaxy had begun to settle into a new equilibrium. The threat that had seemed unstoppable had been eliminated, and the fear that had gripped human colonies throughout the Empire had gradually transformed into something else. It had become hope. It had become belief in a future that extended beyond mere survival. Kira stood in the observation dome of the new research facility that had been constructed specifically to study harmonic frequency technology with the assistance of Solace and Ember. The facility was located on Kepler Station, the human colony that had been saved by the USS Trinity during the final battle. The colony had recovered quickly from the trauma of facing potential destruction, and it had transformed into a center of learning and innovation. The research project had been remarkably successful. Dr. Chen and his team of engineers, working closely with Solace and Ember, had begun to develop the first human technology based on the principles of harmonic frequency generation and manipulation. The dragons had proven to be patient teachers. Despite the limitations of trying to convey biological and intuitive processes to beings who relied on mechanical and electronic systems, Kira could see the latest prototype of the harmonic frequency generator through the viewport. It was a massive device, built on principles that human technology and dragon wisdom had combined to create. The generator would not replicate exactly what the dragons could do. It was fundamentally impossible to capture the full sophistication of a biological system that had evolved over countless millions of years. But it represented a significant step forward in human technological capability. Captain Mitchell arrived at the observation dome with an expression that suggested she had important news to share. She had been appointed as the human representative to the Galactic Council, and her schedule had become increasingly hectic as humanity's political responsibilities expanded. But she always made time to visit the research facility and check on Kira and her dragons. "We have received a delegation from the Veiled Ones," Mitchell said, her voice carrying a note of controlled excitement. "Or more precisely, we have received a delegation from the sister of one of the Veiled Ones. She is requesting peaceful negotiations." Kira turned away from the viewport to face the captain directly. She could feel the dragon's attention focusing on this announcement through their mental bond. Solace and Ember had been curious about the Veiled Ones since the battle, wondering what kind of civilization could produce beings capable of such terrible acts of violence and destruction. "What does she want?" Kira asked carefully. Mitchell gestured for Kira to walk with her. They began moving through the corridors of the research facility, their conversation continuing as they walked. "She wants to understand what happened, how an apparently technologically inferior species like humanity managed to defeat our ship. She also represents a faction within the Veiled One's civilization that opposes the aggressive expansion policies of her sisters. There is apparently some form of internal conflict developing among their people." "This is an opportunity," Kira said, processing the information. "If there are factions within their civilization that oppose the violence, perhaps there is a possibility for lasting peace rather than merely a temporary cessation of hostilities." "Exactly what I was thinking," Mitchell confirmed. "I would like you to be part of the negotiation team. Your perspective as a non-human who has chosen to support humanity could be valuable. It would demonstrate to the Veiled One's representative that our alliance is genuine and not simply a matter of human self-interest." Kira agreed without hesitation. She understood the political importance of such negotiations and the symbolic value of having an elf warrior and her dragons participate in the peace process. The negotiations took place in a neutral location, a research station positioned exactly halfway between human territory and the space where the Veiled Ones had originated. The delegations were kept small and carefully monitored to prevent any possibility of treachery or deception. The Veiled One's representative was named Crystalline, a fitting title for a being who seemed to be composed partially of the same crystal material that made up their ships. She had a form that was vaguely humanoid but distinctly alien, with geometric angles and planes that created an unsettling sense of displacement when viewed directly. Crystalline studied Kira and her dragons with an intensity that suggested a level of intelligence and curiosity, matching anything humanity could produce. When she finally spoke, her voice was melodic but slightly dissonant, as if multiple tones were being produced simultaneously. "I have studied your species extensively," Crystalline said, addressing Kira directly. "You are an elf, one of the ancient races. Your kind is known throughout the galaxy as beings who value harmony and balance. Why have you chosen to align yourself with humans?" Kira considered her response carefully. She knew that Crystalline was analyzing not just the content of her words, but also the manner in which she spoke, searching for truth and authenticity in every syllable. "I chose to align myself with humans because they treat other beings with respect and dignity," Kira replied. "They did not demand that I become human or abandon my nature. They accepted me as I was and worked with me as a partner rather than as a tool or a servant. This is rare among species in the galaxy, and it is worthy of loyalty and support." Crystalline made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been some form of data processing. "It is curious that you value what humans call loyalty. My species has been programmed for efficiency. We make decisions based on optimal outcomes and resource allocation. The concept of loyalty to another being is largely foreign to our nature. My sisters viewed your species as an obstacle to be overcome. I have begun to wonder if that perspective might be incomplete." Captain Mitchell stepped forward, her bearing calm and authoritative. "Your species has proven to be formidable, But we have no desire for eternal conflict. We have no ambition to conquer your territory or absorb your resources. We simply want the chance to develop our civilization in peace and security." Crystalline was silent for a long moment, her form seeming to shift and flow, as if she were processing complex calculations internally. Then she extended what might have been considered a hand toward Captain Mitchell. "I will propose to the remaining members of my civilization that we seek a treaty of peaceful coexistence. I cannot guarantee that they will accept my proposal, but I can tell you that there is now enough doubt within our society regarding the aggressiveness of my sister's policy that change is possible." Over the next 2 weeks, negotiations proceeded steadily. The Veiled Ones agreed to cease their attacks on human colonies and to respect human territorial boundaries. In exchange, humanity agreed to share certain technological research materials and to establish cultural exchange programs between human scientists and the Veiled Ones' researchers. It was not a perfect peace, but it was infinitely better than the alternative of continued warfare and destruction. Captain Mitchell returned to human space with the treaty signed and sealed. Her position within the Galactic Council strengthened. By the diplomatic success, the celebration that followed on Kepler Station was joyous, but tempered by the recognition of how close humanity had come to complete annihilation. The cost of the victory had been high, measured in lives lost and resources expended. But the result was a future in which humanity could develop and grow without the constant threat of extinction hanging over their heads. Kira found herself standing on the observation deck of the research facility once again, watching the stars with Solace and Ember at her side. The dragons were content, their role in humanity's future having transformed from that of soldiers to that of teachers and partners in the advancement of knowledge and understanding. Rebecca Walsh appeared beside her, carrying a recording device and that familiar expression of someone eager to ask important questions. "The twin alien girls have been defeated, and a peace treaty has been signed," Rebecca said. "Humanity's position in the galaxy has been permanently altered. What do you think this means for the future?" Kira considered the question thoughtfully, feeling the presence of her dragon's consciousness touching hers through their bond. "It means that difference does not have to lead to conflict. It means that beings from different worlds and different species can find common ground and work together for mutual benefit. Humanity has proven that they are capable of treating other species with genuine respect and equality. That is their true strength, and it is what will ensure their success in the galaxy for generations to come." Rebecca smiled, and Kira could see that she was satisfied with the answer. The interview would be distributed across human space and beyond, becoming part of the historical record of this pivotal moment in human civilization. Later that evening, Kira received a message from Captain Mitchell, requesting her presence at an official ceremony on human world. Mitchell had been promoted to admiral, and she was being given command of a new fleet of starships equipped with harmonic frequency technology. She wanted Kira and her dragons to serve as the first members of a new initiative called the Interspecies Defense Force, a military organization designed to protect not just humanity, but the entire galactic community from threats and dangers.